Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Dan Rook, I'm the COO and co-founder at Start Codon, joined by Jason, my co-founder and CEO at Start Codon. I'm going to talk to you today about how to start and grow a business. This is part, seminar 1 of 5 and other events that we're organising in conjunction with Cancer Research Horizons, and I'll introduce you shortly to Lucia at Cancer Research Horizons to do a brief intro on there. And from our perspective, we Start Codon, we're a venture capital fund and venture builder based in Cambridge. We invest in nationally. Our intention is to first invest on the cap table, typically invest really early with a view of investing in the best startups and growing and scaling them alongside our venture build program. Lucia, do you want to give a brief overview? I'm going to come to the camera so that maybe our attendees can see you, and then I'll pass over to Jason.
Am I in the right position? Yeah.
You're in the right position.
Hi, nice to meet you all. Yes, I'm Lucia Mellad and Translation Manager for Cancer Research Horizons, which is the new innovation engine for Cancer Research UK, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. So Cancer Research Horizons has the goal to help researchers to translate their research results into for patient benefits, let's say, so in general. And in my role as translation manager, I'm the first point of contact for researchers. So please reach out to me with inventions, ideas at any stage, and I will help you to look at the IP position, marketing, clinical positioning, medical need, technical need. We will do a preliminary evaluation, and then I can connect you with a broader network of Cancer Research Horizons. And I'm also the reference person for the entrepreneurial program by Cancer Research Horizons that contributed to this seminar. So please let me know if there's anything you're particularly interested in, and I'm happy to take questions at the end.
That's great.
Thank you.
Just before I pass over to Jason, if you've got any questions, we'll try and fit a Q&A in at the end. Otherwise, there's a networking session for those in person with some lunch afterwards. I'm really happy to field queries. Anyone who's joining online, there is a chat function. If you put comments in the chat, we have to intentionally disable the Q&A just because people tend to put comments in both. But to the extent that we get around to answering it, I'll field questions. We'll do our best to answer it. To the extent we don't, we'll try and follow up after the event. On that basis, I'll pass over to Jason. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Lucia. Hello, everybody. How are you all doing? It's good. Everybody online is ready to learn about how to start and grow a business. This is the continuation of an ongoing relationship we have with CR UK, which we're really honored to be a part of, because we do feel at Start Codon, although we are investing in broad areas, oncology and the needs of cancer patients is something that's at the top of our mind in everything that we do. So this is an opportunity, hopefully, for everybody in the audience and those online to get an overview of what it takes to start and grow a business. Speaking from my own personal experiences, as well as the companies that we're backing at Start Codon, there'll be some elements that apply to you. There'll be other things that are nuanced. We're always here to help, so please do not hesitate to get in touch or talk to my colleagues after the presentation. The first thing is I'm clicking, but it's not clicking. I'll do this manually. Okay, so starting up. This is the textbook startup journey. See, I meet so many people here. Apologies for the wave. So the textbook startup journey, you usually see something called the valley of death. That's where most of you are here if you're just starting up right now. And what's really fascinating about this is that you don't have any resources, you don't necessarily have a plan, but you have an idea. You have some hope, you have some promise. Maybe you've identified an unmet need, but in order to get an investor to back you, to help you grow your company and take it to the next phase, where you're going through your seed round, your Series A, et cetera, and hopefully have an exit, you've got to cross that valley of death. Now, here the y-axis is revenue. So of course, you're pre-revenue, you're not making any money typically for most of the solutions that are therapeutic or diagnostic focused, but that doesn't mean that you don't have a great idea. So rather than looking at this valley of death as a negative place, I think it's where you have the most power. Imagine an actual valley of death, Death Valley. What's there? Nothing grows. It's sand, it's salt, it's one of the hottest places on earth, it's practically barren. But instead of thinking of it as a valley of death, think of it as a place where you have unparalleled opportunities because you are lean and mean. You've got solar and wind, you've got silica that can turn into high value products. That's what happens in Death Valley. So in your own valley of death, you get to come to seminars like this. You get to avail yourself of the support of organizations like Start Codon and the supporters of CR UK. You can write to people randomly on LinkedIn who are leaders in the field. And because you don't have anything yet, they will take the time to help you. And usually they'll do it for free. Now, once you've achieved some finance and made some progress, that's when they start charging you the big fees for consultancy. So think about how at the beginning of the journey where you are right now, you actually have an unfair advantage over the competition. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain, and people are far more inclined to give you their time. There are many, many analyses. This is one of my favorite of why startups fail. So in this case, I looked at 101 different startups, usually variations on a theme. These surveys come out every year. You see that there was no need for what they were doing. They ran out of cash, etc. But the majority of the reason why, in my experience, startups fail is because the team was not right. So team building and making sure that you are introspective and close the gaps in terms of your skill set is absolutely essential. There's a great article, which I'm happy to share around after this talk. It came from the Harvard Business Review, and it's called, "Do you want to be king or queen, as the case may be, or do you want to be rich?" The concept is being king is all about control. It's about, it's my idea. I'm the best person to bring it forward because I'm brilliant. And in many cases, you might be blinded by your own brilliance, but in some cases, it might actually be the case that you are the best person to bring it forward. But you have to be objective and open-minded to the possibility that you are just one part of a team. The person who wants to be rich, and I mean that in the broadest term, is the one who wants to be successful. They want to build a team around them. They say, oh, I'm a great scientist, but maybe I'm weaker in the commercial, or I don't understand regulatory, or I need a clinical partner who can really help me translate my ideas to the clinic. I need somebody operations and admin to actually run the company to make sure the wheels don't fall off. So do keep that in mind. It may feel great to be in control, but if you want your company to be successful, if you ultimately want to be rich, it is about your team and bringing the right people together and being open to positive, constructive feedback. So what are the core elements of a successful startup in a business? This applies across every sector, as I call general universality. Now, there are, again, nuances, but starting with team, you have to pull that together. You need to have a concept. Make sure that you've actually conducted proper market research. I don't mean it's my idea, therefore it's great, or I Googled it, or I read an article in PubMed. I mean, you actually went out and spoke to people, and ideally people who are knowledgeable and will push back on your idea, because I guarantee you the first idea that popped into your head is not going to be the end product. It may be where you start, it may be pretty close, but if you think, I have an idea today, I've spoken to 100 people and I'm still right where I started, then something's wrong. You're not speaking to the right people, because there's always room for growth and change and refinement. Then you have to come up with a commercial plan. Make sure you have an actual product and solution. So I'll tell you how that's different from the technology. And then finally, I'd say equally important to team. You can have all the ingredients, but if you don't have the recipe to pull it together and the cooking team to actually bake, let's say if you're making a cake, if I carry out the analogy, that's your story. So ingredients, the team, the concept, the product, the plan. What's the story that you're going to use to pull it together to be able to pitch to investors to convince them to back you? How are you actually going to convey this, not only to those up top, but also to your peers and to the employees that you're trying to hire, considering how difficult of a market it is to find talent these days? It's probably the most difficult in the history of biotech and most companies in general. If you're going to be competing for the best and the brightest, if you're going to be competing for those big blue chip investors, you have to be able to tell a story. If you can't pitch, there's no point. So let's break these down. What does it mean? I love acronyms. You see a lot of them popping up throughout my talk. So team can stand for together, everyone achieves more. And that is absolutely true. So what does that mean? For most of you in the audience, you're scientific founders. Now, scientists make excellent entrepreneurs, but if you don't have the business experience, you can upskill yourself to a point, but there might be individuals who are experienced and might be more suited to that. Think about it holistically, bring those people in early. CEO, just because it was your idea doesn't mean you are the CEO. I've been CEO a couple of times now, and I can tell you, it's not about being in control. It's about facilitating and helping those around you really achieve the mission and vision that you've laid out with the strategy that you've developed with your peers. It's about having multiple bosses above you and multiple people beneath you. So you kind of get sandwiched in between. I like to liken it to, if you've seen Aladdin, the cartoon at the end where Jafar goes, I want to be the most powerful genie. And he'd say, oh, I'm so powerful, I can do all these amazing things. And then they handcuff him and stick him in a lamp and chuck him into the desert. That's what being a CEO is all about. It's not about control or power. It's about articulating a vision and mission, enabling your team to execute on that, and making sure you keep basically your shareholders and your investors happy. So do think twice. If you really are passionate about the science and that's where your strength lies, don't think, I'm coming up with a company, I should be CEO. Maybe not. Maybe you should bring on somebody else who might be better suited. Or possibly you could be CEO in the early phase, and as the company grows and changes, new leadership is required. Again, it's about the concept of, do you want to be rich or do you want to be king? Others you might consider, there's operations, there's an advisory board. Who's going to be actually giving you input on the science and the commercial aspects or the clinical aspects? Product dev. I guarantee you, the idea you have today is likely to be technology, not a product. I'll explain the difference later. Commercial lead could be somebody who's doing biz dev for the organization. Regulatory experience, the regulatory framework for everything that we do, whether it be digital or therapeutic or diagnostic, it doesn't matter. In our sector, regulatory is important, and I guarantee you, you are not going to be able to teach yourself overnight. So it's about getting advice early from the experts, and then at the appropriate time, bringing that resource internally to your team. So now that I've given you the cool down, I'm going to build you up again. The key traits of a successful entrepreneur are things that scientists exhibit on a daily basis. Just imagine you are constantly facing rejection. You have to come up with an idea, you run your experiments and they fail. And you do it again and again and again, like some mad person. Most regular, ordinary people would say, oh, I've given up. This is just too much of a faff. I'm frustrated. Scientists keep at it because you're passionate about what you do. You're curious and you want to keep pushing. Those are the hallmark traits of an entrepreneur. You have to go out and convince not only your PI and your colleagues at conferences, but also the granting bodies that you are worthwhile funding. That's very similar to pitching to an investor to get funding for your company. You are constantly selling. Some people think of sales as a dirty word. I had a sales career in my early days, and I learned so much about commercialization and the difference between a product and a technology. If you're interested in expanding your career, I suggest you try out a sales role if you want to be commercial before you go into business development side. But fundamentally, you are in a space where you're constantly developing new disruptive technologies, you're facing failure all the time, you have to be resilient, you've got great ideas, you're presenting your ideas, that's like pitching, communication. These are all the hallmarks of an entrepreneur. And they're all things that you inherently have today. You can hone them, you can improve them, you can pivot them towards business, but you have those elements within you already. So don't underestimate that. Of course, being organized is important. Relentless, I cannot emphasize that enough. You will come up with against challenge after challenge after challenge, but you have to keep pushing. Not dogmatically, not being blinded to maybe sometimes you've got to fail fast and just quit. But if you know that the ultimate goal is, I'm going to cure those patients, I'm going to make this area of treatment better, I'm going to make sure that we eradicate cancer within my lifetime, then you have to keep that goal in mind and do whatever it takes to make sure that your idea translates and actually leads to those outcomes. And when all of those naysayers come to you, when all of those knocks hit you and knock you down, that relentlessness, that resilience will help you keep pushing forward. I will come to mindset later on, but it's so important. Now we're talking about teams, and I just want to spend a moment on diversity. It's a good thing I don't see any eyes glazing over in the room because diversity is important, but sometimes it's used as a pummel of like EDI, EDI, EDI. Diversity is not just gender and ethnicity. It can also be neurodiversity. It could be diversity of background. It could be a variety of different things. But I wanted to talk about the business case for diversity. Yes, we all agree in this day and age, it is the morally right thing to do. We need more diversity. We need more women on boards. We need more people of color on boards and in management rooms, etc. But do you know that study after study over the past decade plus by McKinsey and others has highlighted the business case for diversity? I love this study from McKinsey because it's longitudinal. They started off in 2014. The name of the study changes every year to keep it fresh, but they have summarized in the 2019 study the previous year's results. And you see, if you're comparing the top performing, like Fortune 500 companies, UK as well, I think is included, top performing companies versus the ones in the bottom performing, there's a significant gap in performance based upon the diversity of their boards and their management teams consistently across sectors. So you can see there's a trend as well. If you look on the left-hand side, looking at gender diversity versus the right-hand side, ethnic diversity, from 2014, the performance gap was 15%, going all the way up to 25%. And in terms of the top performing and the lowest performing for gender diversity, it's actually 48% difference between the two. Looking at ethnic diversity, you see an even more pronounced performance. So if you have a more diverse board, if you have a more diverse team, if you have more diverse investors to actually expand out the network and increase participation in entrepreneurship, you will get better results. It is not just for optics. It's not just because it's the morally the right thing to do. It will ensure that your business is successful. So when you're thinking about building your team, incorporate diversity at all facets. It's essential, not just ticking a box. And as I said, neurodiversity is another one. We all know that as scientists, we tend to be on the spectrum, as they call it. I'm very proud of being somewhere on that spectrum. And I think that neurodiversity is something that's so key for our robustness when it comes to building a business. Okay, so now you are doing your research. Oftentimes, people think of or develop rather, a solution looking for a problem. I like to say it's like if you have a hammer and you're looking for a nail. So you develop this really shiny hammer and you go around convincing people your problem is a nail, definitely. You should do it the other way around. Make sure you start off with really understanding the problem statement. That's where the market research comes into in a bit. Understand that unmet need. Some examples of ways you could pitch and know, is it a hammer looking for a nail or is it actually a solution to a real problem? Think about liquid biopsy and early detection of cancer. Think about CAR T cell therapy and other CAR cell therapies. They are addressing real unmet needs. When they pitch for funding, the companies in these spaces, they don't just say, oh, I've got a widget. It seems really cool. I'm just going to kind of figure it out. Give me some money. Trust me, I have a Nature paper. I'm really clever. That's nice. But what they want to hear for your business is there's a significant unmet need, ideally with a sizable, quantifiable commercial upside. And the solution I've developed addresses that need, as opposed to what most people have is a platform play early days. Now, Start Codon and other organizations like us, we help solutions looking for a problem to really tease this out and develop it. So if you come to us, you don't have to have all of this worked out. But as you think this through, always be considering what is the unmet need, the problem I'm solving, and the solution I've developed, describe it. Market research. I harp on this a lot because I'm so sick of people pitching to me and saying, I'm the first, I'm the only, I'm amazing with their idea. And I love, a bit of a sick pleasure I get, I love to Google things while I'm talking to people. And I go, well, have you looked at this? And they say, oh, I don't know about that company. And I say, well, what about this publication? Oh, I haven't seen that publication before. So if you get into a room with me, just know that I will be Googling and fact checking you in real time. And as soon as somebody says, I'm the first or the only to do something, I automatically don't believe you. And 99% of the time it's wrong. You don't have to be the first or the only, you just have to be the best. I will say that again. I don't care if you're the first to do something outside of an IP context. You don't have to be the first. You don't have to be the only one doing it, because I like when there's a bit of competition. It shows that there's an existing market that you're tapping into. I just want you to be the best. And importantly, we want to help you be the best. So if somebody came to me now and said, I have a new gene editing platform, and they said, no one's ever done gene editing before, I'd go, yeah, I'm pretty sure people are doing gene editing. And a lot of the problems you're talking about, there's something called CRISPR-Cas9, you might have heard about it, people are using it. I'd rather them say, I think there's an unmet need because CRISPR-Cas9 is very popular, but it has these limitations. This is what my platform does. Here's how it outperforms. Here's what I think is great about it. Here's how it needs to be improved. And I'm realistic, it needs improvement. And here are the applications that I think I want to pursue, but I'm not quite sure. Can you help me figure out how to commercialize? That's a pitch that we want to hear. That's what investors want to see, not the other way around. And importantly, talk to many people, talk to them often. As long as you're not disclosing anything that you think is commercially overly sensitive or would compromise your IP, have those conversations. That's primary market research. Go and speak to them. Because what we don't want is to be in your own hype bubble and say, I'm brilliant. It's a great idea because I came up with it. I asked my parents and they love me and they said it's wonderful. My best friends say, oh, I'm so clever. I don't care about any of that. Go talk to the naysayers. Go talk to the people who can give you a critical analysis and quantify that you've had that conversation. For example, if you're in the therapeutic space, I want to know that you've spoken to patients who are suffering from the cancer you're addressing, and the leading academic researchers, maybe even some of your competitors if you're bold, and a couple of pharma partners, and the payers who might be reimbursing this therapeutic when it gets to market. And maybe you've spoken to somebody who's a clinical trial expert, just to have a conversation to flesh out your idea and say, is it real? Does it have legs? Don't just tell me, oh, I Googled, I found a market research report online, I'm clever. I'm not here for it. So primary market research is everything. Talk to people and record what you've spoken to them and find a way to condense that and hone your plan. Okay, so 4 questions for you once you've done that research and your commercial plan. Why you? Why are you the team? Why are you the ones to actually pull this off? Why is now the time that you're actually going to do it? How are you actually going to pull this off? The operations, the plan, etc. And importantly, how much? And when I say how much, it's how much money are you going to make, but it's also how much will it cost to make that money? I want to know what resources are required for you to actually bring this plan to fruition. So if you can see there's kind of a logic trail here, unmet need, and you have the solution, you've convinced me of that. You've got the great team who's going to pull it off, and all the different aspects of commercialization are covered by your team or some external resource. You've got a commercial plan, it's going to take this many years, it'll take this much finance. Here's the reason why we're the best, here's what we're going to accomplish. And the product solution is going to be a key portion of that. I said earlier that you have a technology and that's great, but a technology does not a product make. Most of what we see Start Codon are platforms because we love platform tech. But also there are single assets. You might have an antibody, you might have a small molecule that you might want to be developing. Those are all in the same boat of being great technologies. But what is the target product profile? That's a phrase and a document that's commonly used in drug development and pharma because they want to know what's the unmet need you're addressing, how are you going to deliver it in the clinic, how much does it need to cost, who's going to take it, for which indications, if it's a therapeutic, do you have a biomarker strategy that goes with it, et cetera, et cetera. That's a product. What's the route to market? How are you going to sell it? It's not just, I have a great tech, I published it, I have some IP that I filed, give me some money. How are you going to make that tech transition into a product? And all these different aspects should go into that product profile. So what is the IP that underpins it? Not everything has a patent. It could be know-how, it could be software. What regulatory approval will you need? Cardinal mistake is, obviously we're in the UK, but don't make your deck overly UK centric. You need to show a healthy understanding of the UK and NHS and also now Europe, the separation there. But in particular, they'll want to see a US strategy and even an Asian strategy. And then ideally in my world, what's the rest of the world strategy look like? But make sure you've thought about this holistically. Okay, MHRA works this way, but the FDA works that way, and so on and so forth. And my Asian strategy might be to partner with so on and so forth to access those markets. Think about it holistically. Do you have a supply chain? Can you actually make this? We've seen that in some cases, we've had companies pitch to us where they have silicon chips in their devices. Let's say it's a medical device, and there's a shortage of silicon chips. And you ask them the question, well, what are you going to do about the shortage? Major manufacturers are gobbling up all the resources, and they go, oh, I hadn't thought about that. I don't know what I'll do. How do I compete with the likes of Apple and ARM and everyone else if I can't get access to materials? So it's no good pitching to me a device that's heavily dependent on a scarce resource. You need to think about that over whole overview. R&D pipeline, that's usually not a problem for scientists. They love to focus on the R&D, and kind of the business is a second thought. You've got to flip that around. Quality management system. I know firsthand the pain and the importance of having a quality management system. And I'm talking about more than just electronic lab records and like, oh, okay, maybe you even have a LIMS if you're fancy in academia. I mean a robust quality management system with CAPAs and the whole lot that you're looking towards ISO certification for whatever it is you're doing, if it's appropriate, et cetera. Because quality is everything. Robustness, reproducibility. You will fail as a company if you haven't accounted for quality from day one. And it tends to be in academia because we're very used to experimenting and changing protocols. And, oh, I wrote something in my lab notebook, but I didn't write this bit down. And, oh, I said I'd make the buffer fresh, but really I used the buffer I aliquoted a year ago. All those nuances could kill a patient in the clinic. So you are not going to go from your academic lab into a company and finally translation unless you have a robust quality management system in place. And the good thing is, if that's not your forte, hire somebody on your team to do it. Recognize that it may not be your thing, but it's important. Find the specialisms, bring them onto your team, either as consultants, advisors, etc. And then, of course, depending on what you're doing, there's manufacturing and logistics. It's easy to put into a pitch deck, oh, I'm sure we'll figure it out because other people do it. That's not what investors want to hear. They want to hear that you really started to think it through, and you at least have some idea of the questions that you need to answer. In a business plan, the worst thing you can do is either represent that you understand something when you don't, or completely ignore it as a problem. It'd be much better in your plan to say, here's what we know. And from speaking to all the experts around us, here are the things that we're not sure about, but here's our plan to figure out and answer those questions. As part of this fundraising round, we feel not only will we get these technical milestones, but we are going to answer these fundamental questions. Which application should I go for? What's my reg strategy? Do I want to go into US right now? What do I want to do for the rest of Europe versus the UK? Those are things that you don't have to have an absolute answer for at the early stages, but at least you need to be able to demonstrate you're thinking in the right way. That's what investors love, that honesty and that clarity of thought. It's not about having the right absolute answer, because in many cases, there is no right absolute answer. Now, this is a quadrant I stole from another investor, and I love it because it shows your personal vision for the company versus the depth of customer engagement. So basically, what kind of market research have you performed? Now, I make fun of MBA quadrants all the time because who doesn't love a good quadrant? Usually what happens is you say the upper right-hand corner is the best, and you'd stick your company logo there and go like, I'm amazing, look at me. All my competitors are over here, even the ones that are worth billions. No, they're what? They're awful. But me, I'm special, I'm in the upper right. Nobody believes that, but everybody does it, but it's a thing. Imagine the upper left here. If you have unconvincing versus compelling vision, and you're in your own echo chamber on the x-axis versus listening, you could have a really sexy story, but you have no idea what anybody else wants. So you pitch really well and go, I'm clever, look at me, I'm amazing, great, Theranos, yeah, give me some money. And you go, wait a minute, if I talk to people, this really doesn't make any sense. But no, but your pitch is so well, so I'll just give you the money. You're going to fail. Then in the bottom right, you've got somebody who really leans into the market. They're almost overly informed. They're overly concerned with what the market tells them today, but they don't have a vision for the company that can show that there's growth and longevity. That's also not so good. So they're very clear on like, I'm going to do exactly what people want from me now so I can make as much money as possible today, but they might be losing track or losing scope of the long-term vision. We have a company in our portfolio, we were just discussing this earlier today. Near term, they're developing a digital product. They want to bring in revenue. Long term, as you can imagine, it's a big data play. But you'd be surprised how many companies neglect the longer term view. Because if you put it on a slide, I'll ask you, well, what are you doing in your infrastructure and planning today to prepare for that big value? How are you going to protect the data? Are you getting upfront consent to be able to use the data in that way? How will you make sure that it stays anonymized? What are the regulatory implications? And they go, oh, I don't know, but big data, AI, big data. You go, oh my gosh. They're just stuck in a loop like they're some kind of robot. So you've got to make sure that you have that bigger vision. And then the lower left is where nobody wants to be. You're completely self-deceived. Nobody wants what you're selling. You don't even like it. You don't have a good vision. Nobody wants to be in that quadrant. So I'd like to say, everybody listening, of course you're going to be in the upper right, but I'm willing to bet that most of you won't, but you can get there. And you should be honest with yourselves about that. So now you've got the plan. And you're ready to think about how am I going to raise money to actually pull this off and fund this? So let's talk about that. What money are you raising and what are you going to do with it? I'm going to say this again. How much money are you raising and what are you going to do with it? Use of funds. I like to start with use of funds. What are you trying to accomplish? And then how much is it going to cost? And you pull that together and you pitch. As opposed to, I think it'd be really nice to raise 10 mil. And then I'll just make up a budget to justify. It'll be 8 million in R&D because I really like R&D, and then a little bit on the other stuff, and then great, give me the money. No, I want to be very clear that the use of funds are realistic and they make sense and will achieve the milestones. We want to see a roadmap of how the investment that we put in is going to help you achieve those key goals and objectives. I think one of the mistakes people make in their pitch decks is they usually go out with just one figure. I'm raising this amount for this a bit of equity. I'm raising 700K to do this and do that. I much rather have a continuum. Show me all the key milestones that you want to hit and how much capital it will take for you to hit each one of those. And then we can have a conversation about, are you raising money to hit 1 milestone? Or are you raising money to hit 5 milestones? Because inevitably, you will put down a figure like 800K and you'll see an investor who goes, oh, your check size is too small for me. Nah, you should be raising more. What would you do if you had more money? And you go, oh, I don't know. Or you go the other way and you say, I'm raising 5 mil. And another investor goes, oh, you're far too early for that 5 mil. I mean, like, could you do it with maybe 1 mil? If I gave you less money, what would you do? And you go, oh. So to avoid that conversation, map it out. These are the key milestones and value inflection points. Here's how much capital it takes for me to hit each one. And then you've got something, a flavor for everybody. And then when you have the conversation, you can talk to the 10 mil investors and you can also talk to the 500K investors and everybody's happy. You don't trip up on yourself. Again, always keep in mind those next value inflection points and don't just focus on valuation. Valuation is how much a company's worth, price per share. It impacts the dilution when you raise capital. Too often people focus on valuation and they're obsessed with, I want to raise as much money as possible and minimize my dilution as much as possible. That's very much a king mentality. The rich mentality is I'm bringing on value add investors. I am building value in my company, and I will be able to justify the valuation that I'm asking for. And ultimately, we're going to get across the line, get to clinic, and there'll be upside there. It's about the impact and also being realistic. So once you've really defined and agreed what this plan is, outline your fundraising plan and put into your deck. And also make sure that you are going to stay track with your goals, because you have to deliver ultimately. It's not enough to be able to say, I'm going to make sure I keep on top of things to raise my finance. And oh, it's like an academic grant. We've seen that with companies in my experience before. People think I've got the money, but it's like an academia. It's fine, you know, it's like another grant. No, this is venture capital. It's about being fast, it's being aggressive, failing quickly, but hopefully actually getting across the finish line. They want to see that you're delivering. And you need to communicate, here's what I'm working on in my plan. I'm focused and I'm going to pull this off. Same thing goes for the fundraising strategy. Here are the people that I want to go for, not spray and pray. I'm going to pitch to as many people as possible, and then one of them it'll stick. The best thing you can do for an investor is not copy and paste your email when you write to them. These are the little nuanced tricks. I hope you're paying attention, because I guarantee you someone on this call has done it or will do it, and someone in this room is the same. We can tell when you have a bulk standard email that you just insert investor name here. Hi, this is my deck. I'm raising X amount. Take a look. Da, da, da. You don't know anything about us. We get emails from people who are developing, electric cars. We only invest in healthcare. So why are you writing to us for a $50 million investment in an electric car company based in Switzerland when we invest in English companies that are healthcare startups and we invest 250K checks? We see that even in our space. So make sure if you write to an investor, if you want to get their attention, say, I've done my diligence on you. I think we would be a great fit because you invest in my sector. I see that you have these people who can serve on my board and they have experience in my sector. I looked at your portfolio of companies. You've had healthy exits. I see that you've got another company in there that's complementary to what I do. Show them you've done their work, and then our minds will be blown. Oh, you really do want to date me. Oh, I like this. Okay, let's dance. That is the kind of focused approach where you can impress investors, not only flattering them, but also showing the way that you think through problems. They want to know that you are calculated, cold and calculated strategically, but they want to see that you are calculated and strategic, not just I'm one of multiple numbers. It's kind of the Netflix conundrum. We hear this from our VCs all the time in our network. If you have too many options, everybody shuts down. If they think that you're going out to everyone, they'll be like, oh, they're not really interested in me. They're just emailing everybody. And so even if you are interested in them, they'll ignore you. So you email 500 and then you get nothing back. This is very important. When you pull together that budget, and you've talked about your use of funds, there are a couple of very important figures that I want you to be able to have in your head whenever you pitch to me. What's your burn rate? How much capital are you spending per month? When are you going to be balance sheet insolvent, technically insolvent, versus your cash out? Cash out means there's no more money in the bank. So let's say you've raised for 18 months. Cash out will be 18 months from today, more or less. And you should be able to say to any investor who asks you, my burn rate is X number of thousands of pounds per month. That's how much I'm spending. I'm cashing out in this month and this year, but I'm technically insolvent in this other month. Technical insolvency or balance sheet insolvency is when you have so many commitments and there's a kind of liabilities on your balance sheet that money is already committed. So you may have, let's say, 100,000 pounds left in the bank, but that 100,000 pounds is committed to paying out salaries, paying for rent, paying for X, Y, and Z. It's already committed. So don't have the illusion that just because technically the 100K runs out in March of next year, you will be balance sheet HMRC insolvent in December because all that money is already committed. Most companies in the startup realm are technically insolvent pretty much all the time. So it's normal. But in terms of governance and in terms of communicating to the investors who want to come in, have those figures in your head. Burn rate per month. How long is your runway? When are you technically insolvent and when do you ultimately cash out? And then working backwards from that, you want to have at least a 6-month window from cash out, before cash out, for you to be bringing in some money. Usually people say, oh, I've raised 18 months, I've done 12 months worth of work, and then I have 6 months to raise. Fundraising always takes longer than you expect. Achieving milestones always takes longer than you expect. So engage early. The minute you raise money, you should be thinking about the next fundraise and engaging already with the next set of investors. Okay. I talked about researching potential investors and making sure you understand why you're approaching them. These are just some key points to keep in mind. your stage of growth and who it is you're looking for money. If you're a very early pre-seed, maybe you come to a program like ours, or you go to a business angel, versus if you're approaching a Series D crossover fund that only writes minimum 15, 20 million pound checks. Why would you go pitch to them for 100K? If you do pitch to them, you would say, hey, I'm not pitching to you for money because I know I've done my homework. You are not investing in companies early like mine, but I want to put myself on your radar, or I want one of your companies to collaborate with me, whatever it may be. Have a clear ask, but don't go preaching to the wrong crowd. Is the investor investing in your field? Don't write to me if you're an electric vehicle. I'm curious about electric vehicles, but I don't invest in them. So why are you wasting your time on me? Are you pre-seed versus later? And also, what else do they bring to the table? I always like to say that investors are like vampires. That's what the V in VC is for, vampire capital. They will drain you of all your vitality and blood. It's a thing. But you can have a friendly Twilight vampire, like, you know, like an Edward, or you can have a really scary Dracula vampire who's going to turn into a wolf and whatnot and eat you. So either way, they're going to take something away, but you want to get some benefit in return. So what you need to think about is, if I'm bringing you into my company, what are you bringing to the table? Are you going to be opening doors for me? Have you had a successful track record? Are you going to help me with the next round of funding? Is there somebody you're going to put on my board or in my network that's going to really make me be the success? Find investors who aren't just dumb capital. Find investors who are going to help you be the best. Remember what I said earlier, you don't have to be the first or the only, be the best. Find the investors who look at you and say, I see your work in progress, but I'm going to help you dominate this field, not come back to me when you figured it out. And then you piece it all together into a story. Because nothing I just said previously makes any difference unless you can articulate it and put into a pitch. That is everything. Imagine if you have front and substance as two different aspects of what it takes to raise capital for your business. A good front means you can pitch well, but maybe there's no substance. I referenced Theranos before. It's unfair, I guess, to pick on Elizabeth Holmes because Theranos is just one example of many. It's just that they got caught out. There are a lot of companies and a lot of businesses out there that have a really good front, a nice website, a great pitch deck, they're very charismatic, they do their thing. But when you look underneath the hood, there's no substance. Now I'm going to say something that some people might find controversial, but I don't care. In the UK, we're horrible at front, really awful at pitching and commercialization. It makes people uncomfortable to sell because they think, oh, I don't want to talk about myself. It's kind of like a humility thing. People want to be, you know, don't get too big for your britches kind of mentality. But the substance is outstanding. I dare say there's more substance in UK companies and therapeutic opportunities, et cetera, oncology space and otherwise, than there is in the US. But people feel uncomfortable and are not naturally good at selling and pitching. So the substance is here. So what we try to do at Start Codon is identify that great substance and say, we can help you put the front on top of it. We can help you pull together that story. So when they do look under the hood, they go, oh my gosh, this science is amazing. There really is a really great opportunity here. This team is fantastic. They're just very humble. Because I can guarantee you, when an investor is used to looking at the flashy types, if you go and say humbly, they might put you in a bucket where they won't fund you. We teach you how to speak language that they understand, but also be able to back it up with real data and opportunities. Condense this into an elevator pitch. We're company X. What's our mission? What's the proof of concept, the data that we have? How much are we looking to raise? What are we going to do with it? Practice your elevator pitch. Practice it often in the mirror. Practice it with your friends. Practice it with people who know nothing about what you work on, because you have to be able to convey what you do to lay people. So I'm going to go through this because I share the slides afterwards. I'll just whiz through these. But basically, these are some of the key components to what you'd want to have in your pitch when you go for investment. Of course, the title and the executive summary. Start with the problem statement. What is the problem that you're solving? Don't start with, I'm a great team, or here's my solution. No, I don't care. Convince me of the unmet need and the problem you're solving. Then tell me about the solution of the product you developed and the team and the why now and everything else. Go into your business model, talk about the financials, the key metrics you're going to raise. Now, what's important here is that all of these are topics, not titles. Another cardinal mistake people make in their pitch decks is they have a slide and the title is problem. And then the next slide title is solution. You are wasting valuable real estate on your slides. Do not do that. If you do that, I will delete your email. So if you haven't heard from me, it's because your pitch deck was so horrific, I couldn't bear the thought of even looking at it one more second. What you need to do is make sure that your elevator pitch we just talked about is the topic of every slide. Because if I'm really busy and I'm looking at hundreds of opportunities as an investor per year, What I'll do before meetings, I will flick through your slides quickly. And if your pitch is in the title, the big unmet need in cardiovascular disease is X, Y, and Z. We see that there are solutions on the market, but they don't feel the need for these reasons. We've developed a solution that is cheaper, is faster, is more efficient, whatever. We are going to save X number of lives and make Y amount of revenue over the course of the next 15 years. Put that in the title of each slide. So I should be able to flick through in 2 minutes and just read the slide titles and get your pitch and say, fantastic, I want to give you the money. Don't make me hunt for the context in the slide itself. Another little trick. So you've got your money, you're growing, you're having a lot of success, now you want to scale. It's a very different mentality when you go from that early stage of a company in the startup world and the type of investors and backers you have. Very different personalities involved, very different motivations. So I just want to spend a few moments to talk about the differences between the startup phase and the scale-up phase. A lot of it comes down to mindset, as well as changes in the team. So for example, if you're in the startup phase, it's typically like a person and their dog or their cat. You don't have that many resources. You end up being a jack of all trades. You have to wear lots of different hats. You're going to do a bit of finance. You got to do a bit of HR. You've got to do some technical. Maybe you have to go and pitch, put your business together because there's nobody else there to do it. That's understandable. And that's great in the early days because it's really exciting. A lot of people get that buzz, that adrenaline rush, but it is not sustainable. If you want to grow and scale, you cannot grow and scale yourself. You have to build a team and learn how to delegate and specialize as you grow. You also can't build a company around you. What if you quit? What if you get pushed out? What if you get hit by a bus? If the whole company is dependent upon you being the central jack of all trades or Jane of all trades who does everything, and you for some reason disappear, let's say you get hit by a disease like COVID, everything falls apart. That is not sustainable. You don't want an inverted pyramid where it's you and everyone's resting on top of you. No one will give you kudos for saying, wow, you're absolutely essential. It may feel good in that moment to be that king, but this is about making everybody rich and successful. So you're bootstrapped, and on the scale up, you're well-resourced. And the startup phase, you're just trying to go for the minimally viable product. Do not let perfection be the enemy of good enough. It's a saying I picked up from a friend of mine, Mike Murphy at Mellad, another great investor in the oncology space. Do not let perfection be the enemy of good enough. You need to get a product out to the market as quickly as possible. You need to get your pitch decks out to people who can advise you as quickly as possible. You need to get your business up and running so you can learn and pivot and grow. If you sit and wait for perfection, you won't get there. So figure out what the MVP is. That's different when you're in the scale-up phase. No one's going to give you, for your flagship products, the grace to be like, oh, we're still figuring it out. They're expecting at that phase, if you're raising hundreds of millions and you're getting market traction, that you have validated the product, you've validated the market, you are actually robust and scaling and consistent. It's a very different mindset than like, oh yeah, we're just going to be agile for everything. Agility still plays a role, different mindset. Of course, you can be more maverick in the in the startup phase, and more risk averse typically as you grow. You still take calculated risk, but you can't just pivot overnight a company of 500 people in the same way you could with 5 people. And then finally, we all like to have that kind of really laid back, casual approach to things when you're a small team, it's relatively informal, and that's wonderful. That's where I love, and that's my happy place and thrive. But when you get past a certain point as an SME and grow, you have to bring in more formalities. You do need to have formal processes in place. And if that's not something that naturally comes to you, again, hire the team, bring in the people who can implement that. It's a necessity. Doesn't mean that you have to be completely formal, but you have to be a lot more formal, again, with 500 people than you are with 5. And then finally, and hopefully I have some time for some Q&A, I want to talk about emotional intelligence. We spend so much time talking about technical skills and business skills and all these so-called hard versus soft skills. I like the concept of emotional intelligence and power skills, something that we don't really get taught in school. Can you do math problems? Can you balance this chemical equation? Can you culture these cells? Can you publish a paper? That's great. But do you know how to communicate with each other? Can you understand emotional cues? That's not just for your team and your colleagues and your family, but it's also for investors. If you're in the room, can you read the room? Can you see if you're resonating or not? Do you understand how not to be a nightmare of a boss? Those are things that are important. Gone are the days where the Steve Jobs of the world could be, I'm gonna not curse, they could be unsavory characters, but oh, they're making lots of money, isn't that wonderful? Those days are done. You don't get a pass if you're commercially successful for being unkind and being a nightmare to work with. So this is, I'm gonna butcher this, but Gnathi Safton. My husband will be proud of myself. It's know thyself. Be self-aware. What are your strengths? What are your challenges? What are the gaps that you need to fill? know yourself, know how you can improve. Everybody has room for growth. It should be something that's positive. Look for that feedback from people that you trust. It shouldn't be something that makes you uncomfortable. It should be something that really you thrive on. There's a great book that I recognize as instrumental in my own careers. Feel the fear and do it anyway. I'm not here to plug necessarily, but I like the concept. So even if you don't read the book itself, look at the title, feel the fear and do it anyway. Don't let analysis paralysis hamstring you. If you overthink things, you might think yourself into inaction, and that's no good. Sometimes you just have to go for it. I also like this other book, Growth Mindset. A fixed mindset is about, oh, I'm afraid of failure and people might judge me and I have limitations and I can't do that, or who am I to do these things? A growth mindset is about growth. Failure is an opportunity to grow. It's an ability for me to work with people. I like these challenges. I think it's really exciting and I'm enthusiastic to actually stretch myself. Have a growth mindset. It's essential for your business to succeed. You can have all the ingredients and the best market you're approaching and the best team, but if you have a fixed mindset, you will fail. Somebody with a growth mindset whose technology is not half as good as yours, whose insights on oncology or their solutions are nowhere near as powerful and impactful as yours, they will beat you because they have the right mindset. We see it time and time again. Prioritize culture. This stems from the mindset. And from that concept earlier, I said about knowing yourself, but also not being a nightmare to work with, about emotional intelligence. Culture is everything. The more your company grows, the harder it is to maintain that culture. But you should be hiring not only for talent, but for attitude. If somebody is really technically brilliant, but they cannot work with others, unless you can isolate them and tap into them as a consultant, I would steer clear because they will destroy your company and your culture. They may have the most brilliant CV ever, but you have to prioritize culture. And if they're going to come in and be disruptive in a negative way, it could destroy everything. So prioritize culture and don't just hire for, oh, you look great, technical skills. You've been in the industry for 15 years. You've got 30 publications. What about the culture? And as we say, the fish rots from the head. So you've got to actually make sure from top down, you encourage and nurture that culture. Again, another acronym, FAIL, first attempt in learning. Don't be afraid to fail. If you're not failing at least one thing every day, you're not trying hard enough, is what I like to say. Not catastrophic failure, but it's something. So thank you, everyone. I think we have some time for some questions, and I hope you enjoyed it. There's time for questions, yes.
I don't know if we've got any questions in the audience. We've got one question online, which I'll just come to the camera with, just so everyone can hear. So question is, how do you find people to build a team? And what are your key takeaways? I will say we do have a session on talent. It's the third seminar going to be running later in the year, but one question online.
Well, I'll keep it brief. First, you watch our seminar on talent later this year, and I'll tell you everything you need to know. Second, it's about networking and talking to people. It may be somebody in your peer group that you already know. You could go to trusted advisors and ask them who they recommend. There are more formal channels where you can advertise jobs, or you can go into LinkedIn, you can go to recruiters. But in the early days, particularly if you don't have them as many resources, it's about leveraging the ones that you do have. You're in that valley of death. Talk to people. Go to networking events. Join programs like Start Codon, where we can help connect you to our network. Really just have those conversations. That's the best way to find team members. And then if you have specific needs, ask those in your networks how you can actually connect with either a consultant or someone you can hire to really address those gaps.
Anything from the audience at all?
Oh,
Alex.
Great talk, thanks so much. I guess it's natural that this perhaps a little bit overwhelming, but there's a lot of ground and there's a lot of depth there. Where would be good kind of go-to resources? It's probably not a one-stop shop where you're going to get everything you need, but any tips on where you might be able to get started?
Okay, so the question was, thank you for that question, Alex. Go-to resources and how not to feel overwhelmed by the enormity of what could be required of you. So I think there are a lot of resources. I mean, obviously, the reason why programs like Start Codon exist and we're working with CRO UK is to be a provider of that resource. So it might have felt a bit shock and awe, particularly if you're new to the space, but there are loads of programs out there, not just ours, that can help you if you aren't the kind of person who learns by just reading online. So there are accelerator programs at the University of Cambridge and the universities of those listening online that can help you. Ones that are free, they're early stage. They can take you through the beginnings of a business plan. They can take you through mentoring, etc. You can join venture builders like Start Codon. We go a bit more in depth. We hand hold with you and take you on that journey. There are online resources. The business model canvas is one of the ones that's kind of a go-to in the market. So if you Google business model canvas from Strategizer, it's a very basic framework for thinking how you can develop your business. So you have to identify what's the need, what are the supply channels, like how are you going to commercialize, etc. And that can be an excellent start just to get the idea onto paper. Sometimes it is the conversations with those who are in the know. Go to your tech transfer offices. They have resources as well that can help you neither financially or just through their time, think through the aspects that I just went through in this presentation. So I personally learned through doing and speaking to others. Some people learn by online, a lot of resources available. And what we can do as a follow-up is provide a list and links to some of those resources.
So I wonder what was used to when you felt that we should take the first step towards Start Codon. And what was your initiative, what your team,
Oh, so the question is inspiration for us to set up Start Codon. So Dan's my co-founder. I don't know if you mentioned that when we started. I'd say my personal motivation was I've always been keen on education and mentoring and helping those who just could achieve so much, but didn't have access to the resources, or maybe didn't have the self-confidence. From back in the day, I was mentoring young students to supporting a lot of different programs. And then having gone through the experience myself, from being an academic researcher and a postdoc to working at tech transfer at the university, and then having my own biotech, and then now doing this with Dan, I thought, all right, I've learned from this experience that one, I don't want to be operationally running, a company of that sort myself. I love the idea and the ability to help others. This is an excellent opportunity for us to really do something big. And importantly, it was an opportunity to have a bigger impact. If you're in one company, for me personally, then I'm focused on my one thing and there you go. But if you're helping multiple companies and multiple founders, someday, decades from now, we can look back and say, Start Codon had a massive impact to make the world a better place by finding all these aspiring people and supporting them to do what they do best. So that opportunity really resonated with me. And we met in a pub and we fleshed it out and here we are.
4 years later.
4 years later, yeah. Oh, yes.
Thank you for your talk. So I was wondering, how would you choose one person over but another based on social skills and culture in the hiring process?
Well, there's some cheeky ways you can do it, but I would never do this intentionally. Some people put them in stressful situations in different contexts to see how they react. That's a bit experimental, so I try not to do that. And the good thing is that we have on our team, so Em, who'll be giving a presentation later this year, she's our talent director, because we recognize that not only for our team, we make sure that we bring on amazing people and maintain culture by having lots of conversations with them. Of course, you've got always a probation period, but you spend time together in different contexts. When you have your first disagreement, that'll tell you a lot about the individual. You talk to references of people that they've worked with before if you haven't worked with them. But when it comes to helping our companies build their own teams, we are there as a sounding board, as a kind of a third party to vet individuals that they might want to bring onto their team. Because maybe they're putting their best face forward because they really want to have let's say, a good first impression. We're there to pressure test and be like, okay, I'm gonna ask you some challenging questions. I'm gonna make you a bit more uncomfortable than maybe you've been before. Let's see how you respond. I think that's one of the best ways, but a lot of it is communication, a lot of it is discussion. And I'm gonna emphasize this again, have a probation period. Make sure you've got a good, sizable probation period with clear goals and touch points so that if they're not working out, you can address it.
We had our first argument. We haven't spoken in 4 years. This is just the meeting of minds. Just some questions, if I can, online, Jason, before we close up in a few minutes. So first one is, in your opinion, what fraction of biotech startups go through an accelerator versus get organic growth or direct VC?
I wouldn't want to quote a number, but there's a study by Bohurst in 2019 where they look at the success of companies that have gone through accelerators. And what's interesting is it was across sectors, so I don't know for biotech specifically, but the ones that have gone through accelerator programs that are corporate backed do better than companies that haven't. But oddly enough, the third component, the worst performing were companies that have been through an accelerator, but the accelerator didn't have corporate backing. So it's not just going through an accelerator per se, it's accelerators that have corporate backing so you get access to the resources and expertise that they bring, as opposed to there are thousands of accelerators, literally thousands of accelerator programs. A lot of them are what we call stagnators. You go in, you don't really accelerate or change, you just kind of sit. So it's about choosing the right programs. It's perfectly legitimate for companies to go directly to venture capital. I think that's fantastic. But for those who want extra help and extra guidance, there are plenty of venture builder and accelerator programs they should look into. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering how all or nothing is it starting a company? Like I can see the benefit of maintaining some sort of an academic connection, but yeah, that's just a question.
It's a great question. It's not all or nothing. You hear stories where PIs will jump into a company full time. What we typically see is you have usually an enterprising postdoc or a PhD student who really wants to run with the idea. And eventually when the company has enough money, they jump in. You have a PI who will consult as an advisor to the company and maybe potentially second for a couple of days a month, but usually they keep their academic relationship, they stay employed, and that is a great duo. You've got someone in the company full-time driving it forward when the company has money. You've got your PI in academia collaborating with the company, consulting for the company, but still maintaining their academic roots.
Thank you for that. That's great. I was wondering, how early would you say that scientists and inventors should approach potential clients, potential investors, from when they have the initial idea, when they have a working prototype, preliminary data, or somewhere in between?
As long as you are protecting your IP, we're going to have an IP session, so I don't want to go into it now, but as long as you're protecting your intellectual property, you're not disclosing anything, the earlier the better. Early and often and meaningful. Those are the three things. Early, often, but meaningful. Don't waste their time. Don't ask silly questions, and show that you're growing. My rule of biz dev is I do lots of things in threes. I learned that from a mentor of mine. So I like to have an initial conversation where I'm 80% listening and 20% talking. And if they ask me questions, I answer it and then turn the question back on them because I want to learn from them. So if you're on a call for an hour, 80% of that first call should be listening to the person, and 20% should be like, okay. Then I go away and I come back and have a follow-up and say, I've spoken to multiple people. It's more 50-50, 50% them talking, 50% you talking, and you're just trying to pressure test. I think what you told me was X. I think the unmet need is that. I think the advice you gave me was this. Is that true? Then the third conversation, especially if you're pitching for investment or for a partnership, is 80% you talking and 20% them listening. And it's mostly them nodding their head saying like, wow, you have listened. Oh yeah, you have addressed those points. Oh, that's wonderful, great. Can I help you? Can I give you money? So keep that in mind. Have those conversations early and often and make them meaningful. But in early days, try to absorb and listen, take it on board, synthesize it, and then come back and pressure test it. And then the third time is when you pitch. I hate when people meet me for the first time, they go into a hard sell. It's the biggest turnoff because they have no idea what I'm interested in. Most of the times they have no idea what they're interested in, and it usually falls flat. So the earlier, the better. I mean, lots of parties and alcohol. But if you don't drink alcohol or like to party, how do you maintain the motivation of your team? I think you have to make sure that they are bought into the vision. So one of the things I did at Cambridge Epigenetics is we had town halls. So every 2 weeks and after board meetings, I'd make sure that I would stand up and say, okay, there's 85% of what we discussed at the board meeting I can share with you. There's some things that are confidential, but for the 85%, I'm going to tell you what we're presenting at the board, how the company is doing, what the cash out is, so they all know and can decide for themselves. Don't hide financials from your team. Say, we are cashing out at this point, focus minds. And if they're committed, they are motivated to make the company successful. If they're not committed, they'll be looking for new jobs, and it'd be better for them to go in any case. So buy them into the process. This is the mission and vision we have for the company. Do you buy into that? I don't care if you're the most junior employee all the way up to someone who's C-suite. Every opinion matters. Do not make anybody in your organization or team feel that somehow because they don't have the right title or the right look or the right name or whatever, that their opinion doesn't matter. So to keep them motivated is financial remuneration, is engagement with the mission and vision, and it's that openness, keeping confidential things confidential, but it's that openness to make sure that they feel that they're part of the story. The worst is, I think, two top-down organizations where you've got the rock star here and everyone else is just a cog in a wheel and they treat you like you're meaningless. Also, things like personal development, which we'll go into the team session and presents, are essential as well. They need to have opportunities for growth and ownership and knowing that they feel supported. It's the emotional intelligence side of things, as well as the, oh, I gave you some money and I gave you some shares. That's not sustainable because someone else could give them more money and more shares.
So just a few questions from online just before we wrap up. So you got some examples of minimum viable product and what constitutes that in your mind?
Yes, so I'll give you an example. Again, with my previous company, we started selling a kit that was for processing DNA for sequencing to discover epigenetic biomarkers. The first product we went out with was, let's say, premium. So, there was a cost associated. It required micrograms of DNA, but people wanted to use nanograms of DNA. It required very expensive sequencing, and we didn't have the bioinformatic tools to interpret the data. But we had enough of a product to go out as an MVP and get that feedback. So although 100% of the market was available, only 5% of it would use our MVP, gave us the feedback. We went back, Mark 2 of the product could access 30% of the market. Then we came back, Mark 3 of the product, 70% of the market. Every time we were improving and moving, it was all up to the basis of that MVP, because that feedback was invaluable, because we were developing and improving in a direction that had nothing to do with what the market wanted. Had we waited another year to have a perfect product, we would have missed the mark. We were focused on A, and the problem that they really needed solving was B. So by going out early, we learned B, we developed towards B, we sold more kits.
Just some more. One is Start Codon specific about whether we invest, what we invest in, and whether we invest in digital healthcare focused companies or not.
Yes, we invest in, yep, the answer is yes, we invest in digital health, medtech, diagnostics, and therapeutics, anything healthcare focused.
Sorry, really interesting question on, which is that the person who's posed a question hears a lot about biotech's long-term vision to be acquired by big pharma with clinical muscle. Do you imagine this will change to biotech launching drugs themselves? And if so, what needs to shift in the industry?
I think there's a lot of shifts. I think that pharma is getting more into the prevention and wellness space, which is interesting, and into the digital space. I think that small biotechs, we are going to see some of them launching products. I think digital will be the first to do that, like digital therapeutics, but then there will be maybe cell and gene therapy and then maybe some small molecules. But pharma is really good at what they do, which is scale up and manufacture. It's very hard for a tiny biotech to launch something all the way through phase 3 in particular with those costs, and then have the network to launch it to broadly, whatever markets they're pursuing without having pharma involved. So rather than trying to build up all that infrastructure from scratch, I do see pharma playing a key role as a partner to get to market for a lot of the different solutions that are being developed. But not everything is pharma, that's in the therapeutics place, some diagnostics. I think that you look at Exact Sciences, they're a multi-billion-dollar company, early detection off of the basis of one test for colorectal cancer early screening, a stool-based test called Cologuard. So they were in existence for 20 years. They built up a pretty sizable organization in Minnesota, have one product on the market, is turning over billions a year, and they've only addressed maybe like 3% of the addressable market. They brought that to the masses themselves. But interestingly, a few years ago, they tried out a partnership with Pfizer to tap into Pfizer's sales network. Because Pfizer was selling drugs for colorectal cancer, they said, your sales reps are going into these offices, could you also market our test? So there's still partnership there with pharma that was interesting in the early days.
Great, and just a couple more that come in. And one thing I should mention, just for everyone in the audience and virtually as well, is you talk about business plan and business plan canvas. I know Cambridge Enterprise have got a talk which is being advertised locally about running a business plan canvas in a couple of days. So it might, and if you're on socials and want to check that out, also worthwhile, just building on what Jason said. But one which we get asked quite a lot, actually, is quite relevant, because I know, Jason, you've got to go. First one is, what is the advice for securing a partnership or licensing agreement? And would you recommend a third party doing it? This is for companies that have already got established and are looking for deals to get to that next stage.
I think having a third party, particularly those who are used to negotiating types of agreements, getting involved is really helpful. Obviously, if you're licensing from the university, it's always good to have a third set of eyes from the academics who produced it, the university who might own it, someone to help you with licensing. So definitely, I think third party advice is great.
I think there's a couple more, but I know you need to.
We can follow up and answer. Sorry if we didn't get to all your questions. I do have to run. Thank you, everyone in the audience. I really enjoyed it. And yes, hopefully you're all successful. Please get in touch. Thank you.